There was once a time when the world moved without ticking clocks, without watches on wrists, without glowing numbers on a screen. People lifted their eyes to the sky, and the sky answered. The sun was the clock, and its light was enough to guide the rhythm of life. Imagine a village hundreds of years ago. Morning did not begin with an alarm, but with the soft rising of light, spilling gently over the rooftops. Farmers opened their eyes when the first rays slipped through wooden shutters. They did not ask, "What time is it?" They asked instead, "How high is the sun today?" The marketplace slowly came alive, not because it was 9 a.m., but because shadows were short and the air was warming. Life followed the natural heartbeat of the sky, the sun as the master of hours. The earliest people understood one thing: the sun never failed. Every morning it rose, every evening it set. This pattern was as reliable as breath itself. The Egyptians, thousands of years ago, leaned on this truth. They watched how shadows stretched across the sand. A tall stick planted upright would give them all the information they needed. In the morning the shadow was long and stretched to the west. At noon it shrank and stood directly below. In the evening it leaned long again, now to the east. This simple stick became the ancestor of all clocks. Later, people shaped it into the sundial, a stone, carefully carved, with numbers scratched along its edge. As the sun moved, the shadow pointed to the hour. It was the sky, writing time across the earth. But it was not perfect. On cloudy days, the sundial fell silent. On stormy nights, there was nothing to read, yet still people trusted it. After all, they did not demand seconds or minutes. They needed only a sense of when to gather, when to pray, when to return home. A day shaped by light. Picture yourself in that old world. At dawn, when the first glow touched the horizon, roosters crowed. This was not 6 o'clock sharp. It was simply morning. The baker rose with the birds, kneading dough by the light of oil lamps until the sun was bright enough to see without fire. By midday, when the sun stood directly above, shadows vanished almost completely. This was the time of rest. Workers placed down their tools. Soldiers sheathed their swords. Even the animals slowed in the heat. Noon was not a number on a dial. It was the burning silence of the earth under the highest sun. And when the skies softened into evening, when the long shadows stretched again, families knew it was time to gather. Stories were told. Bread was broken. Lamps were lit. The sun gave more than warmth. It gave structure, rhythm, and the very sense of passing hours. Temples, prayers, and the hour of God. For many civilizations, time was not just about work, but also about worship. Temples needed to know the right hour for prayer. In Mesopotamia, priests watched the skies carefully. They believed the movement of the sun and stars was the language of the gods. To miss the correct hour of a ritual was to disrespect heaven itself. The Greeks carried sundials into their cities, setting them in public squares so that all could see. Time was no longer only for farmers, but for philosophers, lawmakers, and poets. A shadow on stone told citizens when to gather for speeches, for theater, for debates. Romans later spread sundials across their empire. In the center of Rome, tall sundials stood as monuments of order, reminding every citizen that the empire itself was in rhythm with the sun. Yet, even then, time was different in each city. Noon in Rome was not noon in Alexandria. Every place carried its own sun, its own hours. The problem of the night. But as people's lives grew more complex, a question rose. What about the night? The sun could guide them by day. But after sunset, time became a mystery. Traders traveling late, guards standing watch, or monks rising from midnight prayers all needed a way to measure hours in the dark. So came water clocks, bowls with tiny holes at the bottom, letting drops fall at a steady pace. As the water level sank, the passing of hours could be measured. The Egyptians used them, the Greeks improved them, and the Chinese crafted them into clever machines with wheels and floating figures. Yet still, the sun was the master. Even water clocks had to be adjusted daily, reset by the rising and setting of light. Humanity had not yet broken free from the rule of the sky, the poetry of shadows. To live in that age was to feel time differently. It was not cut into minutes and seconds, but painted across the earth in moving light. People were patient with time. They did not rush to catch buses or punchwork cards. They lived by a larger rhythm, one they could not control. A farmer knew the perfect hour to plant seeds not because a calendar said so, but because the sun's warmth told him the soil was ready. A traveler could tell if it was late enough to stop for the night simply by the angle of the shadows on the road. Life was slower, but it was not without order. It was simply guided by the greatest clock of all, the sun. Centuries passed, and towns grew larger. Villages became cities, markets stretched wider, and rulers wanted more order. A farmer could live by shadows and still survive, but a city filled with trade and travelers needed something sharper. And yet, for a long time, the sun remained a trusted guide. Imagine standing in the middle of a medieval town square. There is no buzzing of phones, no ticking of watches. Instead, a tall stone sundial sits planted near the church. Its shadow tells everyone how the day moves forward. Merchants lift their heads to check it before setting prices. Children glance at it, knowing when the school bell will ring. The sundial is like a silent tower, speaking without a voice. But when the sun slipped away, when clouds gathered or storms rolled in, the city fell into timelessness. People guessed, argued, or simply waited. The hours became foggy things, and life slowed again until the light returned. The discipline of monks. It was in quiet abbeys and monasteries that the hunger for measured time first grew stronger. Monks believed each prayer must rise at the right moment, and there were many of them. Sunrise prayers, midday prayers, midnight chants. But how could they keep track if the night was long and starless? To solve this, they began creating tools of patience. Water clocks ticked softly in the stone halls, the dripping echoing like a heartbeat. Later, candles were marked with lines, each line burning away to show the passage of an hour. In the silence of those abbeys, time became something sacred. Every drop of water, every inch of melting wax was a reminder. Life itself was flowing, burning, vanishing. And still, the monks turned their faces to the rising sun each morning, because only it could reset their world. Time for soldiers, time for kings. Outside the cloisters, armies also discovered the way to time. Marching men needed schedules. Generals needed coordination. Imagine two groups of soldiers trying to meet at noon on a battlefield. One shadow just a little shorter than the other because their towns were miles apart. For one side, noon had already passed. For the other, it had not yet arrived. This confusion often turned dangerous. So armies carried portable sundials, small brass instruments, carefully crafted, that could be set up wherever the sun was shining. These were treasures of survival. Without them, messages might arrive too late, and battles could be lost. But a deeper question lingered. If every town used its own sun, then every town had its own time. Noon in London was not noon in Paris. Even inside one kingdom, villages disagreed. Travelers would walk into a new place and suddenly discover the hour was different, though the day felt the same. For centuries, this was normal. Nobody worried about exact minutes. A messenger arriving in the afternoon was good enough. But slowly, as trade expanded and ships began to cross oceans, this difference became a problem. Merchants wanted to agree on hours. Sailors needed precise reckoning of days to guide their journeys across the seas. A sundial tied to one city could not help a ship in the middle of the ocean. And so, humanity's reliance on the sun, steady, eternal, but local, was beginning to strain against the needs of a growing world. Life painted in light. Still, for ordinary people, life was colored by sunlight. A mother kneaded bread in the kitchen, knowing it would rise by the warmth of the afternoon. A child chased his shadow through cobblestone streets, watching it grow longer as evening approached. A shepherd guided his flock home when the hills grew golden. Time was not a number yet. It was an experience. It was the scent of morning bread, the glare of noon, the coolness of dusk. People felt it with their bodies. Their skin knew when it was late, their stomachs when it was mealtime, their eyes when darkness was near. This was a slower, gentler world. Even mistakes, arriving late, leaving early, were forgiven. After all, how could one argue with the sun? It was the only clock that never lied. The first public hours. Eventually, Cities began to desire shared hours. Even when the sun was absent, towers rose with great bells, rung by monks or watchmen. These bells did not show exact minutes, but they gave rhythm. 1 bell meant morning, 2 meant midday, 3 meant night was coming. The sound spread across rooftops and narrow alleys, touching both rich and poor. For the first time, everyone in the city could hear the same hour together. Even if they could not see the sun, they could follow its pattern through the voice of bronze. And so, little by little, humanity began to step away from the direct hand of the sun, replacing it with echoes of metal, drips of water, burns of candles. But still, the ultimate master remained above. Bells needed the sun to know when to begin. Candles were lit by the rhythm of daylight. Water clocks were reset each dawn. A world of shadows and waiting. Think for a moment what it must have felt like to live then, to be in a darkened room during a storm, waiting for the clouds to break, because only then could you know the hour. To ride on horseback along a country road, measuring time not by a device in your pocket, but by the length of your shadow across the grass. Patience was a natural part of life. The sun could not be hurried, and so people did not expect precision. They lived in trust that dawn would return, trust that shadows would tell the truth, trust that life was measured not in seconds but in cycles. This was the age when clocks still belonged to the sky, when light itself carved the hours, and when time was not a cage but a gentle rhythm.